We'll call the meeting to order. The MPO Transportation Technical Advisory Committee, Tuesday, November 4th, Election Day. That said, we'll go ahead and recognize alternates. I think Ellen Hobble's here for Vicki Robrock of Coralville, and Zaid, are you here for Scott today?
Yes.
Welcome. Any other alternates that I'm not seeing? I don't believe so. That said, looking for approval of the meeting minutes from the May 13th meeting.
Move approval.
Motion, do we have a second? Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 2, public discussion of any item that's not on the agenda. Anybody have anything that's not on the agenda? Okay, I did want to mention, just different today, we've never recorded these meetings before, but as you can see today, we are going to record them, and I think we will from here on out. We're sort of entering the 21st century here at the MPO, so just want to make that aware. So we'll also be using it for our meeting minutes, which will help us out, and just for transparency's sake. So Iowa City's kind enough to help us get all rigged up here today. It's one of their directives for government transparency, so just wanted to point that out. That said, moving on to agenda item number 3, which is a virtual presentation on the Safe Streets and Roads for All Safety Action Plan. We have with us here today Mindy Moore from HDR. And I did just want to mention, for those in the room, you'll remember we received a $300,000 federal grant to put together the Safety Action Plan last year. HDR has obviously been hired to do the work. And the MPO board actually had a similar presentation that Mindy will share with you all today at their July meeting. But since this group doesn't meet in the summer typically, you've not had the presentation. I recognize a few of you in the room are on the steering committee for the action plan, so some of this may be a little repetitive for a few of you in the room, but otherwise should be very informative. With that, Mindy, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
We can.
Good. All right, now I'm going to share my screen. And now are you seeing the screen okay?
We are, thank you.
Okay, good. All right, well, I'm just going to go ahead and, as Kent said, kind of click through the introduction to the Safety Action Plan. So this agenda will cover the introduction to the Safe Streets and Roads for All program, the Safe System approach, our public involvement plan, some of the existing plans and policies that we have been looking at, and what our project schedule is. And you all know Kent and Sarah, and they are my main contacts for this plan. And then, of course, there's me. I'm the project manager. I do have a pretty sizable team that is supporting me on this. I'm not doing it all by myself. And for those of you on the safety committee, you'll get to see some of my team members present at that next meeting. So first of all, Safe Streets and Roads for All was a program that came out of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, also known as the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So there was $5 billion in grants allocated between 2022 and 2026. So basically the US DOT recognized that, hey, crashes have been going up. So this chart shows the percent change in crashes from 2010. So we had all fatalities, traffic fatalities go up about 18% since 2010, and bike ped fatalities went up nearly 45%. So that was pretty alarming. So they wanted to do something about that. And so the Safe Streets and Roads for All program was established, and these are the 8 required elements of a comprehensive safety action plan. So basically the program has 2 main components. One is this planning component. The program can also be used for infrastructure funding as well. So, but to get that infrastructure funding, you first have to have the plan in place. So this is the starting point. So the elements are starting sort of with this blue box here: leadership, commitment, and goal setting. So the local jurisdictions need to adopt a target date for achieving 0 deaths or serious injuries, or an ambitious reduction in the percentage of fatal and serious injuries and deaths, with that goal of eventually eliminating them. There has to be a planning structure. So that is through the MPOJC. and the safety committee that we've formed. I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then in the pink part, we have our analysis part. So we have our safety analysis, which we're working on right now with all of our crash data, looking at contributing factors and trends and crash types, types of road users, and then working with the public and with stakeholders to also identify some of the concerns and the needs in the communities, and then also looking at equity considerations as we go about all of this analysis, and also as we move into the recommendations. So that brings us to the green squares, where we have recommendations for policy and process changes, and then strategy and project selections, which would move more into the infrastructure elements. Throughout the whole process, and as you move forward through implementation over time, you would be very transparent with that progress. So this is the progress and transparency element, where you kind of track crashes and improvements over time, track what you're doing to implement the recommendations as well. So our project area for this plan is the urbanized areas, so the cities of Iowa City, Coralville, North Liberty, Tiffin, and University Heights. So Johnson County has a separate plan that they're working on. The planning structure, as I mentioned, is the MPO as the coordinating agency, the safety committee that was formed specifically for this plan, and then all of your boards and committees that currently exist. You all have a role in this as well, and each one is programmed for 3 meetings. So this is the first of your 3 meetings. You're all also leaders in your communities, so leaderships have a role to be a champion and encourage safer driver behaviors. Commit to that goal of 0 deaths and serious injuries, and we'll have to pick a target date for that. Ultimately adopt the plan when we're finished near the end of next year, and then help with implementation. And part of that is supporting funding and applying for future SS4A projects for implementation. So as I mentioned, that target date for a 0 deaths and serious injuries goal, we would, as we go through the analysis, we'll look at what it might take to achieve something, ambitious, like a 2030 goal, 2035 goal, something that's a little bit implemented over a longer time, 2045, 2050 goal. So as far as crash data analysis, I'm going to give you a little bit of the introductory information related to what we've seen so far. So looking at, this is the past 5 years of crash data, so 7,723 total crashes in the cities, with 10 fatalities and 104 serious injuries, 320 impairment crashes, 97 pedestrians, 121 cyclists, and we got a pretty big number on those young driver crashes with 2019. And we did exclude the interstates and Highway 218 from this data. We also looked at how that broke down amongst the different cities. So of course, this kind of makes sense when you consider the size of the cities. Iowa City has about 65% of the crashes, then Coralville, North Liberty, Tiffin, and University Heights with less. And then this is 108 total fatal and serious injury crashes. So this is not the total of the fatal and serious injuries on the previous slide, because that was the total number of people. This is the total number of crashes. So I did want to put in another slide here to show some of that change over time. So you can see crashes has been rising since 2020. 2020, we all know, was a bit of an anomaly. The total crash count went down quite a bit that year due to fewer vehicle miles traveled. But when you look at the chart on the right, 2020 still had a lot of major injury and fatal. Well, not quite as many fatal, but still a lot of serious crashes over here. So even though there were fewer overall crashes, we were still kind of seeing a lot of serious crashes in that data. So as far as data analysis, we have our safety committee meeting in about a week and a half. We'll go through some more of the details of the descriptive statistics related to those crashes. And then come January, we'll be looking at the other contributing factors and kind of linking that crashes to the roadway network and identifying what we call a high injury network, which is where most of the crashes are happening, and a high risk network, which is where we expect most of the crashes to happen, what's the highest risk areas, and then kind of bringing those together and using our engagement process, we identify a high priority network. So that will be our next steps. So I mentioned the safe system approach. This is the Federal Highway Administration's guiding paradigm for traffic safety. I would expect some of you at least are familiar with this. We've been talking about it quite a bit, but it kind of starts with these principles on the outside of this ring. So we start with death and serious injuries are unacceptable. So we all start from this same philosophical point that this is not okay. Also agreeing that humans make mistakes, so we can't just expect everyone to behave perfectly all the time when they're using the transportation system. Recognizing that humans are vulnerable, that's our physical bodies, are vulnerable, subject to a crash. We're not protected, especially when we're biking and walking, not protected by the vehicle itself. Responsibility for safety is shared amongst the users, but also amongst the designers and the operators of the roadway system. Safety is proactive, so we're looking at, like I said, not just that high injury network, but also the high risk network. So we're looking at where crashes are likely to occur, and that we have redundancy. So there's multiple elements that help reduce crashes, fatal and serious injury crashes. And so the inner ring are those elements. And starting with safer people. So we recognize that humans make mistakes, but they're also responsible for their safety. So we do want people to behave in a safer manner. We also want safer vehicles. Safer speeds and safer roads are where we focus a lot of our energy in these plans, because this is what we have the most control over. So our design of our road systems. Post-crash care, of course, we want when these other things fail, this is where the redundancy comes into play. Then our sort of last defense is the post-crash care. We want that to be efficient and well done as well. So altogether, this is the safe system approach. And so what does that look like? Our plan will recommend major projects. So these would be the high priority network and what projects might need to come into play to make those safer. Systemic projects are things that are a little lower cost, things that you can repeat across the system. So not quite as high of an investment, but they still make improvements. And then what are the policy strategies that we can recommend? So this is where we get more into the behavior modification and other policy changes and what best practices can we adopt. So these are some of the proven safety countermeasures that are also recognized by the Federal Highway Administration. So speed management, we know speed is one of a significant indicator of crash severity. So we want to look at ways to manage speed. Non-motorist safety, as you saw on that initial slide with the great increase for bicyclists and pedestrians and fatalities since 2010. So there's a lot of things we can do to make our areas safer for people to bike and walk. Road diets comes under this one, but I'd like to point out that road diets also improve vehicular safety, and that was actually kind of the original reason for road diets, is to reduce conflict points for motorized vehicles. And this benefit is that you often have extra room that you can also improve the corridor for people biking and walking. Intersections, separating users in time and space, these different techniques. In the areas crash data that we've looked at so far, about 42% of the crashes occur at intersections. Roadway departure. So this is when these are non-collision or single car, single vehicle crashes. These are the leading cause of fatal and serious injury crashes in the study area too. They're about 58% of all fatal and serious injury crashes. And then cross-cutting, these are improvements that you can do that improve both vehicular and bicycle and pedestrian safety and all types of crashes. So I mentioned public involvement. So here's a quick summary of what is planned for engagement. We have stakeholder meetings, community event booths, public open houses, public survey, which we've already done, project updates. Well, it's not done. It's open right now. Project updates on the website, and then engagement that is compliant with the ADA. So we have done we developed a whole public engagement plan document. We've had a few engagement booths already in early October. And then the public survey has been open since September, and we plan to close that on November 14th. So if you haven't seen that yet, please find the link on the website and take it and share it with others. As far as next steps for public involvement, these are all tentative as of right now, but we would plan an open house in the spring, plan additional engagement booths, and we can, these are just some initial ideas of where those might be. We'd have some smaller group stakeholder meetings in the spring and summer to talk more about some of the strategies, and then a final open house around August of next year. So some of the additional work that we've looked at so far is the existing plans and policies. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of things, planning and standards in place that influence transportation and transportation safety. So we looked at statewide plans and standards, regional plans and policies, and then local plans and policies in each of the communities. So we have Iowa City, Coralville, North Liberty, Tiffin, and University Heights. So if you are familiar with any plans that impact transportation safety that is not listed here, please let me know so we can add them to the list. But this is a pretty significant list. Everything from comp plans, where individual cities are talking about how they envision their transportation system, to DOT standards that say specifically how to design something, or SUDAS that says specifically how to design something. So these are all influencing our transportation safety. We did do a municipal survey to each of the cities and ask them questions about their plans and policies in place, and then also what speed management strategies they've tried so far. Since speed is one of those elements of the safe system approach, we kind of wanted to gauge where the communities were at with trying different techniques. So you can see some traffic calming infrastructure that some of the communities have done, setting lower speed limits, which often has to go along with some infrastructure changes as well. Narrower travel lanes is a technique that can be used, tighter turning radii at intersections, additional speed limit signs. And I know a lot of times we hear concern about sign clutter. So I would kind of talk about this also in relation to some streets actually don't have any speed limit signs. I was looking for a speed limit on a street. I get down into Google Street View and kind of go down a corridor to try to find the speed limit, and there's like no signs anywhere. So sometimes we need to think about places that maybe aren't signed. Speed feedback signs, so people know how fast they're going. Those are sometimes permanent and sometimes temporary. Increased police patrol, so we could go the enforcement route, mobile speed radar units, and educational campaigns. So that's impacting our Safer People, trying to influence behavior change. So schedule-wise, we really started in the summer, had a policy board meeting. We've had one safety committee meeting so far, trails and bike committee meeting, and then as I mentioned, that public survey is open. We're meeting with all of you right now, and then the safety committee meeting in about a week and a half. So we'll be finishing up that safety analysis so that we can move into strategies early next year. And then, as you can see, several additional meetings planned throughout 2026 and additional engagement. So I always like to look at sort of the nearer term next steps. So I mentioned the 2 meetings this month. Well, really no meetings in December. We're going to be focused on that data analysis, and then having our next safety committee meeting in January to talk about the high injury and high risk networks, and start to identify our priority network. And that is all I have. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Anyone have any questions for Mindy? Questions about the process, where we're at, where we're going? Okay, thank you, Mindy.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Moving on to agenda item number 4 is consider recommendation to the MPO-JC Urbanized Area Policy Board regarding safety target setting and performance measures for the MPOs required by the Federal Highway Administration. Mindy's presentation and that SS4A presentation is a good segue into this item. As many of you will remember, the Federal Highway Administration now requires MPOs to set targets for 5 safety performance measures as part of the Highway Safety Improvement Program and report them to DOT by February 27th of each year. Those 5 performance measures are listed there in your packets. And for each measure, similar to what we've had to do in the past, we'll either need to choose to support the state's targets as presented, or we need to set our own quantifiable target for these measures. In a quick review of the material that's provided in your packet on how the DOT comes up with these 5-year rolling averages, the good news is it appears as though all but maybe the last criteria there, the non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries, if you look at the charts that are attached, I would say that the good news is that most of those are trending downward over the last 5 to 10 years. So there's spikes and valleys, right? But overall, it looks like they're all pretty much trending downward, which is a really good thing. Again, with that caveat that the non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries, they're a little questionable. There's not as many of those injuries and fatalities, which is good, which also kind of skews the statistics a little bit. And then the other thing I think I mentioned this group last year was they moved from a 75 to 85% confidence interval. So that also skewed the numbers just a little bit. So it's a little hard to look at it in whole, but I think it is promising. That said, similar to past years, I would again recommend that we adopt the state's targets. If at any given time next year or this year, if we want to set our own, we can of course revisit that. But at this point in time, similar to the last 5 or so years, I just don't see a real benefit to moving forward and putting in the work to creating our own. That said, for those that wanted to take a deep dive into those statistics, all of that was attached in your packet for your review. And unless there's any questions for me, I'd ask that you simply consider this item and make a recommendation to the Urbanized Area Policy Board. Any questions about the material or questions about what we've done in the past? Otherwise, I just look for a motion.
So moved.
Second? Second, motion and second. Any other questions or discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. And we'll report that to the Urbanized Area Policy Board next week at their meeting. Moving on to agenda item number 5, which is consider recommendation to the MPO-JC Urbanized Area Policy Board regarding elements of the MPO-JC Long Range Transportation Plan revision process. And we'll talk a little bit today about the vision of the long range plan, the guiding principles, and the scoring criteria. Hannah.
Thanks, Kent. Good morning. Hannah Neal, Associate Transportation Planner. As mentioned at your May meeting, MPO staff is in the process of updating the Long Range Transportation Plan, or LRTP. We're calling Connect 2055. This plan will be the culmination of a multi-year planning process in which residents, municipal staff, and elected officials in the metro area help create a regional vision of our future transportation network. Today, we are bringing you the plan's vision, guiding principles, and proposed scoring criteria for discussion and your recommendation to the policy board. The vision and guiding principles remain basically the same as in the last 2 plans, largely because it's only been a few years and the transportation goals for our area remain largely the same. So we can start with 5A, the vision. The proposed vision for your consideration and recommendation is as follows, and it's in your packet. To ensure the strategic use of public investments and policies for the creation of a safe, efficient, and equitable transportation network that enhances economic opportunity and growth while preserving our environment and quality of life. Are there any questions or comments on the vision? And again, this is the same as last time's plan. Okay, seeing none, we can move on to the guiding principles. These are the goals or overarching guiding principles. We will present full chapters for your review and recommendation further into the revision process. Each of these 9 guiding principles are the same, again, as in the previous plans. We have economic opportunity, environment, quality of life, system preservation, choice, safety, efficiency, health, and equity. And we can go into a little bit of a deeper dive on each of those. There are also little blurbs, again, in the packet for further explanation. Are there any questions or comments? Okay, we can move on to the scoring criteria. Historically, MPOJC has used a set of scoring criteria to prioritize capital infrastructure projects for inclusion in the LRTP, primarily due to fiscal constraints. The current scoring criteria have been applied in 2 previous iterations of the long-range plan, as well as for evaluating MPOJC grant applications, so your STBG TAP and CRP funding. To better align the scoring criteria with our guiding principles, staff is proposing several minor changes to the language of this criteria to clarify its intent. And additionally, we are suggesting a few new criteria for your consideration under the categories of environment, quality of life, and system preservation. So getting into these a little bit. Under economic opportunity, under 1B, we are proposing changing project involves to project is sponsored by more than one MPO jurisdiction. This is just clarifying language. Any questions?
I just want to pop in real quick. So as we go through these scoring criteria, like Hannah mentioned, these will be used to score projects that are submitted to the long-range plan, right, which we all know. As part of the long-range plan, you'll remember to get MPO funding, then you have to have that project in the long-range plan in a fiscally constrained year. So that has not changed from the practice that I think everybody in this room is aware of in the last, in the last 10 to 15 years. So in the last at least few LRTP revisions. So Hannah's going to walk through these scoring criteria kind of one by one. And these will be used to actually score those projects for inclusion in our plan in the next 6 months or so. It's going to take us a little while to get there. But the one thing I did want to mention is that because the projects that are in the plan are sort of intrinsically tied to our grant funding, we also want you to think about the scoring criteria as the criteria we would also use for grant funds, right? So that's our surface transportation block grant funds, our transportation alternative program funds, and then our new program, the carbon reduction program funds. So we just allocated, about $15 million or so. When was that? Just, last year. Yeah. So since we go through that every other year, we'll be coming back to you for the next cycle of grant funding next winter. We'll also have our new long-range plan nearly adopted. By then, it'll be adopted the following May. So again, this really what we're talking about today is for the long-range plan, but I also want you to think about it and how it would be used to score your projects for the actual grant funds because they're tied together, right? If you have your project in the plan, that means presumably you're going to want funds from the MPO for those at some point. Now, all that said, just to complicate things just a little further, we'll still bring this scoring criteria back to you next fall prior to our next funding round. So you'll get another bite at the apple, so to speak, but really we do want the scoring criteria to be as intrinsically tied together as we can. So ideally, this scoring criteria that you'll make a recommendation on today, assuming we get to that point, will likely be the exact same criteria we'll bring back to you next fall for grant funds. So just kind of keep that in mind as we talk through these, in your lens of review, for the long-range plan, we'll use them to score projects, but then again, very likely the same for the actual grant funds themselves. And this has been the same for the last several funding cycles. So whatever scoring criteria has been on the long-range plan has been the same that we've used, and we'll try and move that same direction. So, long story short, just keep that in mind as we're working through these. Sorry.
No, thank you for clarifying. Yeah, so one, economic opportunity, but there was a very minor change. Any questions on that? Okay, we can move on to 2, environment. We added criterion 2C to align with the preserving and protecting our land. 2A focuses on air quality and 2B focuses on water quality. So the focus of 2C is to preserve soil health in addition to reducing runoff and erosion. Any questions or comments on that?
So
Okay.
from sort of an engineering perspective, right, you, the engineers in the room, the planners in the room, you all will be submitting those projects to us again for inclusion in the plan, and then likely for grant funding down the road. Do you see any issues with this? Meaning, will you be far enough along in your process to know typically if you'll be including shade trees and native plantings, that sort of thing? I mean, it seems to us that it'll be an effective way to provide some extra points and potentially some extra grant funding for those types of activities, but want to make sure that that actually fits with sort of how that would work.
I mean, our practice in Iowa City is to do a separate landscaping project, so we wouldn't necessarily tie those plantings to
The grant.
heavy highway
Yeah.
project, right?
Sure.
And so I guess the question that would be there is, with that being a 2-phase project, would it be included with the scoring of the initial project? Or do we just miss out on those points because that's not our practice?
And that's a good question. I would say, and it's really up to this group, on how we end up working through that. But I would say, since there are many projects that span 1 year, right, Ron? So we have other grant projects that'll span 1 to 2 years time, and likely some of that's landscaping, right? Because that often comes last. I would not have an issue with that, but I would open that up for discussion to the rest of the committee. I mean, it seems to make sense to me that as long as that is part of your plan and that you would carry it out, that it would be okay. But again, that's up to the committee ultimately.
Well, that's a challenge to, just committing that we'll do it.
And again, it's a total of 10 points available. I understand that it does affect your project scoring, but I think as long as it's included in the project, if it came a year later, I would not see an issue with that. And a lot of this, I don't want to say it's the honor system, but when we get into the actual projects, right? The MPO doesn't come back and make sure that what was in your grant application necessarily is what was completed. I mean, we more or less know. We get updates from you all. We're out there looking at projects. But it would be the same, I suppose, for 2B, where did you or didn't you complete your soil restoration, that you got points for? I don't know enough. That's not my background to know if you actually did soil restoration. So there is a little bit of the honor system in this for engineers to actually complete what you said you would. We've never had an issue with this in the past, so I guess I would say that's sort of how that would work as well.
And we can also keep in mind that the scoring criteria is just one tool that we use when evaluating grant applications and scoring these projects. And ultimately, when it comes to grant funding time, you will also be discussing each project. And so just because you may or may not miss out on some points doesn't necessarily mean it's going to hurt you in the long run.
That's a good point.
I have a question about B. I don't know if we talked about that before. When it says +1 each, is that like if you have a biosol and permeable pavers, that's 2 points?
Correct.
So what if I have regional 1? That's like, let's say you're building a wetland. That just kind of covers everything. It's probably even better.
In that case, say we would score it the best we can, but then we bring those scores back to this committee for consideration too. So when we go through our grant, well, it would be the same for our long-range plan for those projects, especially when we go through the grant funding cycle. Staff scores it to the best of our ability. We bring that back to you all. And if, for instance, you thought we underscored your project because it included these other things, then I'm not an expert in, you make that argument and we adjust the score appropriately.
Sure.
Yeah. It's a good question.
Thank you.
On 2C, my feeling would be, even if the plans aren't finished at the time of application, there's generally a vision for whether there's going to be trees along that route or plantings. It's not, people have been thinking about these projects for years before we actually put together the plans. There's a vision.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Ellen. I think you articulated it better than I did. But I think as long as it would be part of the project, now technically, Ron, maybe in your case, it's a different project by a code or something in Coralville or in Iowa City. But I think as long as it is the vision of the project and it's completed as part of the project, then I think that would be fair. Yeah. So the intent, as part of this, we looked through a lot of other MPO scoring criteria and tried to distill down some of the parts that we thought were missing within ours and then added to them. And the one thing we were missing in environment was really that, it was that green environment, right? Shade trees and all the benefits that come from it, native plantings and the benefits that come from our water quality and that sort of thing. And it was kind of I would say a hole in our scoring criteria. So this is our effort to try and to add to that.
I just know for us, we don't typically, unless it's a corridor that we're planning, typically do street trees, and agree with it or not, it's because potentially for conflict for utilities of water and sewer, and we just don't have staff to maintain street trees.
Sure.
That, I'd say the latter is the bigger one. So it's just been something that we haven't, it really hasn't been, if we do something like an underground, tunnel or something like that, we're incorporating landscaping, but
Sure.
or if we do a roundabout, we'll include that.
Right.
But I know it's just been debated a little bit internally. It's just, we just don't have an arborist that's dedicated to that. That's just a comment.
With bids.
Well, the goal is to send a recommendation, just as a reminder to the board next week. Again, just for the long-range plan now, but likely grant funding in the future. So we will be looking for consensus today. So if anyone feels strongly against any of these, please speak up. As Hannah mentioned, this is one tool we use. It's not the end-all, be-all. But if it's just something that, if any of these are something that you just don't see the value in and would rather leave them out, please speak up and let us know. Or if there's adjustments to language, other things you might be doing in this for like the addition of 2C, if there's other things in that world you're doing that we're not capturing, those are the kinds of things we're looking for today.
Can I ask a question?
Sure. Sure you can.
The stormwater aspect of that, what would be maybe some projects or practices that would score well there? Something different than your standard MS4 type collection system. You'd have bioretention cells or things of those BMPs incorporated would be potential scoring better in that category.
Yes, and I think what we would look to, Aaron, and those is just in the application actually spelling out what is above and beyond. Again, because we're not engineers on our staff, so explaining to us this is not a typical practice, right? Like maybe some additional soil amendment you're doing. Coralville comes to mind because of all Coralville's bioretention cells and things that Coralville worked on for years. It's kind of that above and beyond, I think, what is required of you from the DOT, basically. That answers your question.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
And that actually was probably one of the more recently added scoring criteria as well, trying to get to our environmental, sort of trying to get, trying to move our projects more towards an environmental friendly view.
I guess for me, it feels like it makes more sense to just have them worth points versus a point per each one. And I don't necessarily have a problem with the possible points or whatever, but it kind of seems like it should be a yes or no thing. Kind of to Zaid's point, it's like you're not going to know at that point, but it almost encourages you to say, okay, well, I'm going to make this one, bioretention, this one, permanent, just to try and maximize your points. You're not going to do that, but it kind of feels like if you're going above and beyond, or you're making that effort, that you check the box, you get the points, versus it being, and I would say kind of A and B. I feel like
I was gonna say, so that's for A and B, it's just make them 3 and 3, essentially, instead of
just to
up 2,
simplify
3.
it. Yeah, I mean, I think the up in like 1B makes sense because it's easy to say either there's more jurisdictions, yes or no. That's pretty straightforward. Where I feel like A and B just feel like they're more, you're doing it or you're not, and it'll evolve with the project.
There's another thing that you could also, it's kind of hard to do with the pre-plant and the planning stages, like what percentage of the area you're trying to treat.
Right.
You could try to set up a target, how
Yeah.
design changes everything.
Yeah.
You might be planning for permeable pavers and it's not going to work, and then change direction.
Is there a consensus to move towards just basically a total points possible?
I would agree with that.
Just 3, 3, and 3, or are we still like 4, 3, and 3?
Yeah, I like what Jason said. I would agree with that.
Just it's a yes or no, you're either making the effort, and like Zaid says, a lot of these things are gonna evolve throughout the project anyway.
Are you trying to get like 100 points total at the end?
No, not necessarily, no. It's a good question though. That's gonna make this really difficult. So everybody's generally okay with just a 3, 3, and 3? Okay, this is good. These are the things that are difficult for our staff to, understand since we don't work through the projects like you all do, so this is good feedback. Anything else on number 2? Okay,
All right, we can move on to 3, quality of life. Under 3A, we clarified the quarter-mile buffer used to evaluate projects located near schools, and we added assisted living facilities as part of that criterion. We also introduced 3B, a new criterion that emphasizes access to healthcare options and healthy food. This addition enhances our quality of life goal by ensuring areas support the needs of residents throughout their lives. So we're not just focused on young, we're focusing on everyone. Any questions or comments?
yeah, so for 3A, the changes in the language are how we've always been scoring these. So for us, it's just being more explicit about what we've actually been doing. Happy to, we can of course workshop that as well, but that's really what we've been scoring them as, and we've been pretty open about that with the group. And obviously 3B is a new criterion, and again, when looking at what other MPOs across the country are doing, this again seemed like kind of a gap in our scoring criteria. Is, when you're talking about quality of life, transportation to healthcare and fresh food is really kind of the bare minimum. So that's where that comes from. But again, happy to talk about it, happy to adjust scores if necessary, or talk through that as well.
It's direct, I have the direct access feasibility, but it's direct access.
Yep, so the way we've been scoring them is if you have a road or trail project that literally touches the property, passes by it, that sort of thing, you would get points. If it is near it but not literally adjacent to that property, you would not get points.
Yeah, 'cause I could see like a trail project, right? We have a university, and we have trail projects that are
Right.
right adjacent to it.
Yep.
That obviously would serve.
Yep. Yeah, so, I think in some of those may be a judgment call, but primarily it's been roadways that touch these. And if it touches the property, you would get points. If it doesn't touch the property, then we kind of just draw a line and say, well, because then you get into the, is 100 feet close enough or 1 lot over, and then you just get into that gray area. So that's how we've been scoring them.
And the safe routes to school it's got to be a designated safe route to school, right?
We don't use the designated safe route to school so much as if your community looks at that as the route or a route to the school. Yeah. So if your community tells us this is the route we want kids to go, through the school system or through what is best, it may be a trail you're plowing in the winter. You're putting effort into making that the route for children to get to school, then we would take you at your word. But the quarter mile is sort of the that's kind of a standard, and that's what we've always used as the quarter mile. So making improvements very near a school that will help children is the ideal. or parents for that matter, get their kids to school.
I think I struggle a little bit with that. I understand what you're going for with the healthcare option at grocery stores, and I get that you're trying to elite deserts kind of. But, wow, it's just a little bit of a struggle, I think, to me. Because they tend to be located on those corridors for enhancing, but it might not have that specific thing, right? If I link to get to that, like I think about the highway corridor, it's right adjacent to our community, there's lots of things that we can do to improve access to that, but it might not have direct access to it.
And these can be adjusted, obviously, these are all the same, where you could say quarter mile. I mean, you could say, this is kind of some typical language we find, but again, it doesn't mean that it's a one-size-fits-all approach too. So if
I guess
quarter mile is the way to go, then that works for us too.
I guess that was the question I had, is, you talk about directly enhances, and it's within the quarter mile. Do you do the same thing for those other uses? Because I could see, to that point, it could be a trail that provides a link between sidewalks that lead to those that would be a huge improvement, but may not be, it may be the next property over or something like that would, so it seems like going from all the points to none is kind of a big drop for what could be a really impactful project. I don't know the best way to do that, but.
So would it be like part of a corridor that leads to those facilities?
Yeah, I mean, I guess regardless of what measurement we use, whether it's direct and adjacent to quarter mile, 5 miles, I don't know that it really, but for our ease of scoring, to take out the, just to make it easier to score essentially, as long as it's like a quarter mile and we can draw that line, that makes it easier for us, because we'll end up scoring, we're gonna get 100 some odd projects from all of you, so it'll help us just to have a direct measurement, but whatever that is.
So is it project enhances access instead of provides direct access?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm hearing. Maybe it just enhances within a quarter mile. Is that, so we basically treat it the same as a.
And is a grocery store too specific? Or do you generalize it? It's basically, the statement is access to food, right?
Yeah, we struggled with that. That's a good question.
Like, is it Walmart, is it Target a grocery store?
Yeah. Madeline, do you know what we looked into this, and there's a standard, I guess.
Yes, it's a certain number of types of food within the main categories. So it's like 36 different types of food within grains, produce, meat, dairy.
Yeah.
And at least 2 of the categories have to have fresh available. So like if you think of a gas station, they usually have like bananas or apples. That wouldn't count because it would, that's only 1 category of fresh produce. That's not 2 categories of like the main food groups. And that came from the USDA.
That seems like a lot of specificness that I as an engineer or anybody as an engineer is ever gonna understand.
And that's why we just say, like in our parlance, just grocery store. I mean, if it's, I think it's what we all would think of as a grocery
Is
store.
a Quick Start a grocery store?
No, it would not.
Dollar Tree?
They would not be.
There's fresh food.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, they would not be. And part of we had fresh food originally, but then it is, so if it passes the Quick Trip and they have 3 apples for sale, do we count that as do you get points for that? So that's where we tried to use the USDA definition. And I certainly don't want to get into having to figure out,
Or, yeah, there's another criteria for that, and it's basically if it's, so like Quick Start, for example, if it does have multiple categories with like fresh items, is over 50% of their sales has to come from food. So like a gas station, it would kind of, make it maybe a little bit easier to.
Okay. It just seems like that's a lot of information that we're not going to have, right? And if I look at a Walmart, for example, or I look at a Target, we're never going to be able to, right? I'll guarantee you that over half of their sales are not grocery, right? So, but there's a grocery component of that. I'm getting too deep into this, but
we spent far too much time on staff level probably discussing this as well, and it's. We can make it what we want, we can drop it. Our idea was I think it's what most people in this room would consider a grocery store, right? And we can debate it if we want. We can drop it from the list. I think healthcare is probably a more simple option, but you also have the same question there, right? Hy-Vee gives flu shots. Is that healthcare? Maybe I shouldn't have brought that one up.
Is it a doctor's office? Access to healthcare or grocery options.
To me, I like a broader category, which would be like business districts.
I mean, exactly, right? I mean, it's, you start,
Well, and some of that one, depending on how you look at it, Ryan, was in number 1, right? Which is access to planned growth or existing jobs in retail. So this is sort of under the more of the quality life category. But again, if it's too complicated and we don't like it, there's no harm in scratching it. It was just our attempt to try and, I think most of your projects that are submitted, I think, we would feel good about providing access to one of these, right? You're improving a road or a trail that is in one of these areas that has a grocery store, right? That has healthcare, that is important to your communities. That's kind of what we're trying to get at, but obviously there's some difficulty there.
I mean, I could see a discussion for access to like parking spaces and stuff like that.
At risk of volunteering more time to your staff, could you guys just build a layer that says these are all the grocery stores in the MPO?
And that,
Yeah. And I think that's what sort of internally we would have in our minds. Bring the scores back, and if the TAC disagrees, we debate it, right?
It does sound like the burden is on your staff for this one, so if you guys are comfortable with it, I don't have a problem.
Any other strong opinions? Well, I think what I did here was that the enhances sort of the access, and with a quarter mile, we prefer though. Okay.
That makes sense.
Okay. We'll give a little bit more thought to it and maybe come up with like an internal list we can use. And we can share that as we start scoring stuff for the long range plan. And keeping in mind for the long range plan, priority of your project does matter for scoring, but really just insofar as it actually gets in the plan, right? So it just has to be on our fiscally constrained list, so it won't matter so much. I mean, realistically, if your projects score in the middle to high categories, you will make it into the plan, and it won't matter if you're number 1 or number 50 in like a stack rank. It really would only matter if your project just falls off the list altogether. So that remains to be seen because we haven't figured out exactly how much funds we'll have yet. So, okay. And just to finish this one out, are we happy with the scores? So we've got the 5 for A and the 2 for B.
Seems fine to me.
Fair enough. Okay, thank you.
All right, moving on to system preservation. We introduced a new criterion 4B that rewards projects aimed at improving pavement conditions or bridges that are categorized as poor or very poor. These projects will receive more points as compared to those that merely maintain existing facilities. Any questions or discussion?
And Emily, can you remind us, or Hannah, what we use for the poor or very poor condition? Like the index?
Yeah, we have PCI data that the DOT and IPMP collect.
Yeah. So the idea here for system preservation, we've always had, if you're working on an existing facility, you get more points. But what we haven't said then is it's unlikely, but some of your projects may be improving existing facilities that really aren't in that bad a shape for different reasons. So this is to try and get at, okay, we are working towards system preservation, but also we're replacing and giving our funding to those projects that really probably need it most, is the idea behind this. And like Emily said, we've been using the DOT's PCI index, so it's pretty straightforward on our end.
That apply to trails?
Do we have, I know the DOT has some index that they've been using, but I don't know that it really would apply to trails.
We want to just specify that.
The DOT, my understanding is the DOT or one of the MPOs actually has a bicycle that actually does virtually the same thing as what we get roadway PCI for, but we have not done that in our MPO.
It's the Des Moines area MPO.
Jason, are you suggesting that we include in system preservation, just specifically calling out this does not apply to trails?
No, I was just curious how it would apply to trails if we want to include that, or if you just say that those points don't apply to trails.
I mean, if there was
The concept would, right?
Yeah, if there's a way to apply it, we would, but I don't know that there is. So the other one, there's a few that, depending on your project and depending on the funding stream, there are a few of these that may not apply. 2A is the other one. It never applied for trail projects because there's no way for us to assess VMT on a trail. So that's a good point.
Any other comments?
Any heartburn with this one? Okay.
Okay, we can move on to efficiency. We made very simple changes. We added the word is to both 5A and 5B to read project is in a corridor. This is just clarifying language. It doesn't change the intent of the criterion. Any questions or comments? Okay. Moving on to 6, choice. Under choice, we removed the term trail or wide sidewalk from criterion 6B and replaced it with side path. This criterion applies to road projects that include a side path measuring either 8 or 10 feet. This clarification is necessary because criteria 8, health, provides points for trail projects. Any questions?
Yeah, so we're really just trying to separate out here, and we can talk about under health for number 8, but trying to separate out points for essentially wide sidewalks or side paths in the right-of-way versus our off-system, off right-of-way trails, and just kind of trying to separate those out was the intent. Any concerns or any heartbreak over number 6?
I don't know that a Shero is at the same level of points as the bicycle lane or some of these others.
Yeah, that's a good point,
Grade separation.
Ellen, and some of our communities have also gotten away from the use of Sharrows altogether or really limited areas. Yeah, so I don't have a real strong feeling, but if the TAC would like to scratch Sharrows altogether, I think that's fine.
I hate Sharrows.
Yeah,
Start words like that.
I would tend to agree with Ellen that if you look at the list of facilities, then a Sharrow seems pretty low bar compared to the other ones. Scratch Sharrow from the list. Everybody feel okay with that?
Yep.
Okay.
All right, we can move on to safety, number 7. Again, super easy on this one. We clarified language in 7A to read project is in a corridor with. We clarified language in 7B to read project is in a corridor listed in the, and we clarified language in 7C to read project will correct A. Clarifying language here, not changing the intent. Any questions or comments? Okay, we can move on to 8, health. We revised the health criteria to differentiate between regional trails linking communities such as the Iowa River Corridor Trail and the North Ridge Trail, and neighborhood trails such as Willow Creek Trail and Muddy Creek Trail. Any questions?
So again, this is sort of in project 6, or excuse me, in number 6 versus number 8 here, we're trying to separate out what's within the right-of-way and what's outside of the right-of-way. We spent quite a bit of time discussing this and looking at other MPOs, scoring criteria. Like Hannah mentioned, the intent behind A is that basically if you have a trail that is linking communities, anywhere on that trail, whether it's at the start of that facility, whether you're extending the facility further, it's a gap. If you remember, well, you can see the old scoring criteria. It didn't work well. The gap language and all that just got really confusing. So this is an effort to say, basically, if it's a trail that spans communities and you're adding to it or improving it, whatever the case may be, you get points for it. And then B is literally those off-street multi-use trails that may just be something that's in Tiffin, for instance, that isn't one of these regional trail network facilities, but that's important to your community, and you would get points for those as well. That's the intent behind this one, is just trying to simplify what we've always done. Just took our staff quite a while to try and figure out how exactly to do it. We debated whether it's in the right of way or what's out of the right of way, but some of our more regional trails are within the right of way. So you can't really use that. It just gets a little bit difficult.
So you'd be able to get points for either 6B or A or B, but not both? Is that right?
Let's see. You could, yeah, I mean, I suppose in theory you could get points for 6 and 8 if you had, if your project had a wide sidewalk or side path and you were constructing a trail, but it's pretty unlikely, yeah. So it's really, you're probably within your right of way, and that would be under number 6. Have a regional type trail network, I River Corridor Trail, something like that, where you'd get more points for under A. Or if you had more this is important to Coralville, but doesn't span other communities, but it's a true out of right of way off-road trail, then you would get the points under number B.
Okay.
Yep, it's a good question. Trying to give more points to those regional trails, a little bit less for your community trail. And then, of course, if you are building wide sidewalks or side paths, whatever your community calls them, same thing. 3 points for an 8-foot wide and 10-foot would get 5 points then.
Any other questions or comments?
Major concerns with this one? This is the one that I thought we would spend the most time on, actually, so this is good. Okay.
Don't jinx it. Okay, we can move on to 9, equity. We recommend removing criterion 9B. About a decade ago, communities were in the process of developing ADA transition plans, and this criterion aimed to provide additional credit for those projects. However, over the years, we haven't awarded any project points based on this criterion during our funding cycles. And in fact, when prioritizing projects for the LRTP, we granted points to only one project under this criterion. So we are recommending removing it. Any questions, concerns, thoughts, feelings?
Yeah, there was an idea, I think, back 10, 15 years ago that this would be a priority use of funds, and it just never came to fruition. So we would just recommend scratching it. Okay.
Okay.
The definition of lower income neighborhoods for this is?
Yep, I think it's at the bottom there,
Oh, I
Ellen,
see.
80% of area median income by block group.
Thank you.
Yep. Good question.
Okay, and last but not least, local commitment. You'll be happy to hear no changes from previous scoring criteria. Do we have any questions, comments, concerns? We can change it if you want to, but we are not proposing any changes. Okay. Again, these scoring criteria will be used to score projects for the long-range transportation plan, and again, keep them in mind as we are thinking ahead for our STBG, TAP, and CRP grant scoring cycle. Today, we are asking for a recommendation to the policy board for the approval of the vision, guiding principles, and scoring criteria with the changes mentioned today. We're asking for a recommendation to the policy board. Any further questions or discussion at this time?
Is there a motion to proceed with the recommended changes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second, motion and a second. Any further discussion? And we'll tease out some of this conversation with the board as well. It seems the one that maybe gave us the most trouble was the grocery stores and the healthcare facility. So we'll do some more thinking at staff level about that, whether we really truly need a list and those kind of things. So we'll have some of that discussion with the board as well. Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign? Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much. It's always kind of hard workshopping these things with large groups, so appreciate the assistance. Moving on to agenda item number 6 is an update from the Iowa DOT District 6 staff, which is Sam Shea, on area transportation projects. Thanks, Sam.
Hey, morning. Still, yeah, okay, morning. If you guys haven't met me, I'm sure most of you have by now. Sam Shea, I took over for Kathy Cutler covering this area. I've been an MPO planner and a district transportation planner for more than 20 years now, but new to covering the Iowa City area. So this was actually really helpful for me too, because there's a lot of projects that I was unaware of were going on and some that I was. So I'm starting off with some joint projects. So a lot of the engineers in the room are aware of these already. This one, for example, is Dodge Street. This is the southbound one-way couplet for Highway 1 in Iowa City. The DOT has about $5.8 million committed to this project in 2027. The city is the lead agency on this, and they're looking at doing a little bit more than what we were looking to do. We're just looking at surface treatment and improving the road that way. The city has some additional ideas that they would like to bring up, and then they're going to take the lead on, and we'll reimburse for our portion, and the city will cover their own portion of that. So trails, bike lanes, sidewalks, ADA stuff. We have a lot of things that they're looking into on that. And if you have specific questions on that, you can ask Jason. This is another one that the city's the lead on and the DOT's helping with. And I hate to wait till the end for questions. So if you have questions about anything, just ask. So as we're going here. For those of you who aren't aware, right now the Burlington Street Bridge is 2 different bridges. It's one owned by the city and one owned by the DOT. And that's a maintenance weirdness that we hope to rectify. So the new version here is going to be one bridge, and it's going to be DOT bridge in the future. So the DOT will own it and maintain it with, of course, some assistance from the city and perhaps the university with pedestrian stuff. So we do not have that in our program yet. The last discussion we had a cost estimate somewhere in the 18 to 22 million range, kind of depending on what options go into the bridge. There's a lot of considerations there that the city and the university are looking into. Pedestrian movements, the dam, the hydraulics lab and how you get people around, and the ADA compliance to get people to the pedestrian bridge over one or Riverside. So there's a lot of stuff going on there. We're targeting a program year of 2029. I guess we'll wait and see how all this plays out, how the city gets theirs going. US 6 in Tiffin, so from Roberts Ferry Road to Park Road. These images don't show the whole thing. They're basically the same. So it's a 3-laning with some ADA improvements and some additional 5-6 foot sidewalks. It's going to be nice when it's done. The pavement's going to be great. It's going to have a 2-way left turn lane down the center and some associated right turn lanes at various intersections. That's the 2 I showed there, is Kroll and Kimberlite. So we'll get a little easier turning at those locations. And again, this is one that the city's in the lead for and the DOT is just reimbursing. So we got some boring stuff, bridges, important but boring. So we've got a bridge replacement, US 6 over the Iowa River in Iowa City. And Jason, are you guys the lead on that, or are we the lead on that?
You're the lead on that.
Okay. So we're the lead on that one. We've got it at 9.2 million. I think the city has some additional things they want to discuss with pedestrian movements and trails and stuff like that. And then they have an adjoining area to the west where Riverside intersects, where they've got some stuff with the intersection they're looking at as well. We've got, the pins are showing the 2 bridge deck overlays, and if you're a non-engineer like me, I always thought an overlay is an overlay is an overlay, but bridge decks are different. They're really bridge rehab projects. They get into the rebar and redo concrete all the way down. So bridge deck overlays are a little bigger than a normal roadway overlay. So you'll see the two locations we have for those, and over the CIC Railroad, $2.4 million for that in FY26. And then in Coralville, or they're both in Coralville, excuse me, and then over the IAIS Railroad and US 6, $3.2 million in FY28. Resurfacing projects, so you guys are all aware of how we do these. We go out, just peel some off and put some back. The county road 46 to the Muscatine County line, I realize some of these are kind of getting outside the MPO boundary, but I thought they would still be of interest, so you knew what was coming. That one from F46 to the Muscatine County line, we're actually looking at running that past Muscatine County line and doing a snow borrow. So it's not normal for us to have very narrow right-of-way, but on that section of US 6 we do. We only have about 70 feet of right-of-way. And with the grading the way it is, it's very difficult for our maintenance guys to store snow. So we can't get snow far enough off the road. And then because of on the angles you see there that drop down sort of towards the south, they drift closed often. So we'd like to stop having the roads drift closed in windy snow conditions. So we're asking the DOT Commission to give us a little bit more money to add to that project in addition to the resurfacing that we'll be doing through there. And then Iowa 22 down by Lone Tree, just outside of Riverside. We've got about $4.8 million in that next year. We're resurfacing northbound 218 from Riverside Drive south or to south of I-80. So needed. That's about $4.2 million. That'll be in 27. Finishing up some projects you guys are all aware of. I-80 near West Branch. That's the picture there on the right. That's kind of what the construction setup was a week ago. It may be even better than that today. They're moving really quick to get that done and opened all 6 lanes. And the 8380 interchange is done, but we still have landscaping and some stuff like that, so you may still see vehicles out with the yellow light. So I was gonna try and have more pictures for these, but my construction engineer emailed me the pictures right before I walked out the door to come here, so policy board will get pictures. You guys are stuck, sorry. So for Evergreen Road to Swan Lake Road is the one that's underway now and doing the Penn intersection. We expect that to be done in 27. We have about $17.5 million remaining in the program, but it was a $63 million project altogether. So going the next segment up, what we call segment 2 of I-380, I don't have a good final cost estimate on this right now. It's in design currently. These are the same 2 pictures, just one's rotated and zoomed in a little bit so you can see it. I didn't give you a whole lot of the length of the corridor because it's just 6 lanes and that's pretty boring. So nothing really changes until you get to the intersection or the interchange with 120th there in Swisher and Shoeyville. And then we're proposing to introduce what we call a dog bone roundabout. I'm sure most of the engineers are well aware of what that means, but if you're not, it basically functions as one big roundabout, but it's split with like a half a roundabout on the right and a half a roundabout on the left. And we think that'll handle most of the traffic for several years to come, and we're not going to have to replace the bridge. The bridge is only 40 years old, which I thought was a good time to replace it, but my bridge office tells me no, they can get another 30 to 40 years out of that bridge, and that would be a waste of money. I expect that one to come in somewhere in the same range as the one to the south. This does include the Iowa River Bridge, which is going to be a little complicated, so maybe more than 60 million, but I don't expect it to be over 100, but we'll see. And And the final one I brought up, because, and again, this is up in corridor MPO's area, but I know a lot of people traverse 380 on a regular basis, so I thought this one was important to include. This is just the intersection at Wright Brothers Boulevard, or the interchange with Wright Brothers Boulevard, and that last segment going up to US 30. We have about $2 million left in the program because we've let all the projects already, with the exception of landscaping and erosion control. It was about $102 million originally, and then add in Cedar Rapids, Wright Brothers work and 6th Street work, which was like another $50 million. So that was a pretty spendy project, and one day I'll have a picture I can show with this. That's all I have for DOT projects.
Any questions for Sam? It's always nice to get update from the DOT. I lose track often of all the projects that are occurring too, so I appreciate it.
It's good for me too.
Yeah.
I needed a little review also.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Agenda item number 7, any other business that we need to discuss today? Any announcements anybody wants to make? I think for the sake of time, we'll skip going around the room, but anything anybody wants to share with the group? Okay. Look for a motion to adjourn. Second? Okay. Those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you, everyone, for your time. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.